Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, em nome de Deus, o clemente, o misericordioso. Sejam muito bem-vindos, queridos irmãos e irmãs, telespectadores, para mais um programa Arresala Podcast. Hoje, com um convidado muito especial, uma pessoa que veio de muito longe, um ativista pró-a-verdade e do lado certo da história, mesmo estando no meio de todo esse conflito, ele não cede e não cedeu às pressões. Ele é o Rabino YISROEL DOVID WEISS, do movimento Naturei Hared Carta, certo? Seja muito bem-vindo, Rabino. Welcome, you're welcome. E aqui também está conosco o nosso querido irmão Mansur Peixoto, fundador do projeto História Islâmica, e ele vai nos dar um apoio muito importante para que este diálogo possa acontecer. Muito obrigado, querido irmão, pela presença novamente.
Eu que agradeço.
E vamos para o nosso programa. Querido Rabino, uma pergunta. Especialmente no Brasil, eu acho que no mundo inteiro existe uma grande associação entre o judaísmo e Israel, e o Estado de Israel. Pelo menos é isso que eles querem colocar na nossa cabeça. O que ele tem para dizer, especialmente para essas pessoas que fazem essa associação, que infelizmente é uma gama enorme da sociedade brasileira?
Especially in Brazil, people tend to associate between the modern state of Israel and the religion of Judaism, and the people tend to mix both things. How can we differentiate between both? And what your opinion to explain to the Brazilian people what's the difference between Israel and Judaism?
É justo, é verdade que o Estado de Israel alega que eles representam os judeus no mundo?
It's true that the state of Israel represents the Jews in the world and Judaism in the world.
Okay, so first I pray to the Almighty to bestow upon me His truth, His wisdom, that I may be worthy of conveying His message, and so sanctify His name and bring peace to the world. Am I translating?
No,
okay.
We'll put subtitles afterwards.
Yeah, and as I say, Sodo Soins, greetings and Assalamu alaikum to everybody. It's an honor and a privilege. But also it's not a simple honor, it's a great honor, because, as I say, it's critical because Zionism and the state of Israel is desecrating, defiling the name of the Almighty. Every action they're doing is so evil. It's so evil, it's beyond words. I mean, every day that we hear what's happening in Gaza, it's open to the world the essence of evil, the groveling in the pits of evil. There's no words to describe what we're witnessing, and they are embellishing this. They are covering this in a facade of godliness, of religion, of Judaism. Whenever Netanyahu goes to the United Nations or speaks in front of Congress, I'm a U.S. citizen, as he's always speaking about that the land is theirs because God gave it to the children of Israel, and it's the state of Israel, and he conflates the two. He totally incorporates Judaism and Zionism, and the Torah he uses as a stick to totally justify the evil, the murder, the genocide what they're doing in Palestine, to the degree that, like I explained, like when you spray a field to rid it of ants, nobody feels bad about that. He has so dehumanized the people of Palestine that to a large degree the world is silent, is watching this and not springing and jumping and doing something to stop this genocide. So they're very successful in their narrative their new narrative that they've created in the world of what Judaism is, and by what they're doing is totally creating Judaism into a monster, and what we call godliness, they're making it into a satanic issue. Of religion, of serving God is satanic. You can kill people, you can murder children and innocent, and so we therefore are very honored, and it's privileged that we're able to stand and speak out and do what our purpose on life is. God created us to bring honor to the Almighty. That's the purpose of our lives, and that we can have this opportunity that you're giving us is a great privilege, and that is, and let us, with God's help, we'll try to shed light. The time is never possible to encompass how much we have to talk about each incident and the whole issue of Zionism, but we'll try just to shed light, and there it'll give the people the opportunity to, from there, to go on and understand comprehensively what the issue of Zionism and the falseness of Zionism, the falseness of the Zionist state of Israel, how it is totally illegitimate, totally non-Jewish. So with God's help, I'll say that first of all, we have to understand it's based on Judaism, they claim, the state of Israel. So what is Judaism? Judaism is a religion of over 3,000 years. God took the Jewish people out of Egypt and made a covenant. We made a covenant to be subservient to God. And we are to uphold the laws of the Torah that the Almighty gave us as part of this covenant, that we, by accepting the yoke of being a Jew, is to accept the laws of the Torah. In the Torah, it's very clear. There's a verses. It says in the verse, do not stray right or left. We're forbidden to add a letter or subtract a letter from the Torah. We have to uphold the Torah exactingly. The Almighty is above the concept of time. He gave a Torah, and it's from God. So it's a blueprint that's above the concept of time and place. So no matter that the Torah was given, regardless it was given 3,000 years ago, it is just as applicable to our lives today as it was 3,000 years. And even though the world has changed, technology has changed, it is the same. We are still obligated to uphold every letter of the Torah, every law of the Torah. And I give always an example. For instance, when the discovery of electric, so you have lighting. Now in the Torah, Jewish people have to keep the Sabbath, because to remember God created the world 6 days, the seventh He rested, so to say. God is above the concept of rest, work, but God created the world 6 days, the seventh rest, and as a Jew, we are obligated to rest on the Sabbath. It says in the Torah we're not allowed to make a fire on the Sabbath. So when the issue of light came about, electric light, so there was a question: is this considered permissible to use on the Sabbath, to open the lights? And the rabbis around the world said that no, it's not permissible. It's like fire and other issues involved here. So I'm just saying how what we do is we conform our lives to the Torah. We don't conform the Torah to our lives. That's what the Judaism is. We are to uphold strictly the laws of the Torah. And thank God, I mean, Jews have been doing this, and proudly being ready to give their lives in not to breach the laws of the Torah, not to rebel against God. And throughout the generations, Jews have died for this. So till today, this is what Judaism is: subservience to God, upholding the Torah. Zionism is a political movement. It's a movement of a gathering of individuals who, for their convenience, they wanted to create their own entity, their own sovereignty, their own statehood. That is all it is. In other words, it's a physical, materialistic concept of having a piece of land and with all the strappings of a country, of a state. A state has army. A state has scientists and Olympic team and all this. So that's what Israel is proud of. Their Olympic team, their Nobel Prize winners, and their powerful army and all that. God is taken out of the equation. The issue of godliness is totally removed from the equation from Zionism, the state of Israel, because their state, they proudly announce, they make the international march for gays, LBGT, that they have everything, they do everything, and they announce that everything is permissible. They announce that it's democracy. You don't have to keep the Sabbath. You could do what you want. And they, in the streets of Jerusalem, where for hundreds of years it was a custom in the Jewish quarters that they would blow a horn Friday afternoon. You would hear the horn blowing like a few hours before the Sabbath, and all the stores would know to close. Nobody remained open. The rabbis then would go around and make certain that nobody desecrated the Sabbath, because it's forbidden to work on the Sabbath. It's a godly decree. That's what it means to be a Jew. When the Zionists come, just take a look for yourself. The cars are going and coming, and the businesses are open Saturday, just like it would be in any day of the week. The flagrant disregard for the Almighty in Israel is revolting and just beyond comprehension. How one could call themselves a Jewish state and take the basics, the Ten Commandments, the Sabbath, which anybody who knows Judaism knows this is the basics of a Jew, to show us that we believe that God created the world 6 days and the seventh he rested. God is the Lord. God is the one who rules the world, and to totally ignore that officially is the greatest rebellion against God that could be. So that is what we're witnessing. That's what Zionism is. Yet they flaunt the Star of David and the name Israel, Jacob. Israel was Jacob in the Bible. So in its essence, it's a total contradiction to Judaism. It's rooted in blasphemy. Zionism is, if you'll ask a Zionist, why do you need this state? What happened? We're living so many 2,000 years in exile already. What is this all about? So they'll say, what do you mean? You were living in exile. So you were hounded, you were harassed, you were murdered. We need something to protect us. I said, wait a minute, what do you mean? I'm a Jew. I believe God protects us. God is my protector. So they say, yeah, look, they start ridiculing the religious Jew. God is your protector? Where was God? And they start spewing blasphemy, heresy. So they say, you see, you need that gun to protect us. The Iron Dome today, once was the Uzi. If you know what the word Uzi means my strength. My strength was God. We say God was our strength. We say in our prayers, Hashem Uzi. And they say Uzi, they took a gun, they called it Uzi. Everything they do is because they're rooted in heresy, in removing God from the equation. That is what we're dealing with. So that is somebody just who wants to understand Zionism. Zionism was festering for 50 years prior to its development of the state of Israel. The idea was burgeoning in the European countries. And the rabbis, we put out a book called The Rabbis Speak Out, which is a compilation of all the major rabbis of every country, and besides the tens of thousands of rabbis, but these were the leaders. For instance, in Europe, there was a Rabbi YISROEL Meir HaKohen. He was called the Chafetz Chaim. Every religious Jew knows of this rabbi because he's a codifier of Jewish law, and everybody uses his books. He's the light for Judaism. And he stated, the Zionists are dead limbs of our people, which causes the entire body to rot. Like a tree, it's a dead limb which causes the entire, if somebody that has a limb that's not working, if you leave it for too long, it's going to infect the whole body. That's why they have to amputate, God forbid. He said this is what he compared Zionism to. They are the dead limbs of our people, which causes the entire body to rot. He was living from 1839 until 1933. He passed away 15 years before the state was created. And so you just get an idea. A rabbi from the Sephardic lands, because I should show the flip side from the other part of the world of Judaism. Sephardic, we call it, from the Middle Eastern countries, from Africa and other. So Rabbi YISROEL Abu Chatzira, Baba Sali, and he lived from 1890 to 1984. So he was already in the state of Israel. He actually left in the middle, went back. He came from Morocco, and he went back to. I forgot to mention, Rabbi YISROEL Meir Cohen was from Radin, like Lithuania, I believe. Rabbi YISROEL Abu Chatzira was from Morocco. He left. He went to the Holy Land, and he left because of this problem with Zionism. But he stated, and this is in 1965, he said, "I hereby join the great rabbis of the Sephardic Eda Charedis, the God-fearing." Eda means community, Charedis, the God-fearing. He said, "I join the great rabbis of the Sephardic Eda Charedis in the Holy Land of Jerusalem, in the holy city of Jerusalem, in support of their Torah ruling that it is forbidden to participate in the governmental elections because it is against our holy Torah." Just to get an idea, I mean, each one in their style wrote against Zionism. Zionism and Judaism is a diametric opposite. Imagine calling it Buddhist Judaism. I mean, that concept like that. Does that jive? It doesn't. It's just.
São duas coisas que não são compatíveis, né?
Are two different incompatible things.
Incompatible. It's contradictory. It's totally the opposite. That is in its essence. But when you come to its fruition, when they finally came and created the state of Israel, you have to understand that God, with his almighty and above the concept of time, and foresaw everything that will happen. He foresaw that there will be people who will be impatient with the godly decreed exile that we are living in. So the Almighty put us on the three oaths. As King Solomon, when God took us out of Egypt, and then he required of us to go into the Holy Land and to build a temple. And King Solomon built a temple, but he wrote the greatest book of prophecy called Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs, where he writes that the Jews are under three oaths. When it will be destroyed. He built the temple. It wasn't destroyed in his time, but he said that when there will come a time and Jews will be sent into exile, God puts on the three oaths. One, do not attempt to return en masse, in large numbers. It's a godly decreed exile. The reason we will be sent into exile is because not we are physically lacking, not because we don't have an Uzi, not because we don't have an Iron Dome, but the reason why we are driven into exile is because we are not on that high level of spirituality that is required to live in the Holy Land as a nation. So when that time will come, as we were warned by the prophets Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Isaiah, all of them warned the Jews that we will be sent into exile. And that came about with the destruction of the temple. So King Solomon wrote, when that will happen, do not attempt to return en masse in large numbers. Secondly, do not rebel against any nation. We have to remember, we are not to rebel, we are to be loyal citizens in every country we reside, in Iran, in Brazil, in Canada, in US, wherever a Jew lives, he should be a loyal citizen, accepting the rulership of that land, praying for its well-being, praying for the well-being of the safety of the land and the well-being of its leaders, even if they're evil to the Jews, even if they're harsh, which happened in many countries that the Jews were unfairly taxed, or they were not allowed, in Europe they were not allowed to buy land, and many other issues, and they were driven, many times they made Jews wear clothing, especially to see that the Jews with a cone to ridicule them. Everything has to be accepted. And that is a law of exile, that we have to be loyal citizens. The third is that we're not to make any attempt to leave exile. These are three oaths of exile. So when God sent us with the dispersion of the Jews throughout the world after the destruction of the temple, the Jews knew this is our life. It's the will of the Almighty, and God is compassionate. It's God's will. It's like a medicine. Somebody is sick, you give him medicine, it's bitter, but the child cries, but you give it to him because he has to have it, because that makes him better. Medicine is something sometimes which is hard. The Almighty sent us into exile to break our haughtiness, because somebody who travels around, he doesn't have his home, it humbles a person. And God wants us to be humbled, and that ultimately there will come a time that God will see that we are worthy of this. He will make a metaphysical change in the world where all humanity will recognize one God, and then all the nations will gather together and serve God in harmony. Not there will become a time where everybody will become Jewish. No, but all the nations will recognize one God and join arms. They also call Maguda Echos. They will join arms and come together and serve God. That is what we aspire and hope as a Jew for, that we were sent into exile because we were sinning. We were not on that level. Not that we were such terrible sinners, we were not on that level necessary to live as a nation in the Holy Land. Now we're dispersed amongst the nations. We are required to serve God with all the laws of the Torah. And ultimately, the Almighty will see the time is right. And He will, when that time comes in a blink of an eye, He'll change the whole world. People will stop being atheists. Everybody will come and join. That's the Jewish belief. And in our prayer books, if you will look at the Jewish prayer books, from the beginning to the end of the prayer, all we talk about is the greatness of God, and that we yearn the closeness to God, and that we hope for the last verse of our prayers. There will come a day that God will be, His name will be one, and everybody will recognize that. That's how we start our prayers, how we end our prayers, and what we yearn for. We don't yearn for a piece of real estate. That's not what Judaism is about. So when we say in our, every Jew says once a year, he says, L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim, the coming year in Jerusalem, at the end of the Pesach, Passover ceremony. So none of our children says to us, I know that you travel, he says a lot. You go here, you go there, you go to Europe to visit, to pray. And to this rabbi said, so why don't you just buy a ticket to Jerusalem? He says, coming here in Jerusalem, buy a ticket and go to Jerusalem. What's the big thing? Nobody even thinks of such a thought because it is so so strange to and so not applicable to what it means returning to Jerusalem. Returning to Jerusalem is our closeness. We're yearning that we were to God when there was a temple. We were close to God, and we're yearning when God will bring the revelation of God throughout the world. That's basic Judaism. Until that day comes, we are expressly forbidden to make any attempts to return. First of all, it's a non-starter. First of all, it wouldn't accomplish anything. And as I gave an example, a lot of times I give it's like when a father punishes a son, he puts him in a corner for misbehaving. And he says, you have to remain there for 10 minutes. And then the child says, after a minute, he fidgets, he doesn't want to stay anymore. He says, I'm going to be good, I'm good, and I love you, I'm coming out. The father says, I don't want to hear that you're good. You told me that 10 million times already. I want to see that you should sink into your head by sitting there for 10 minutes that it's gonna go into your head that what you did was wrong, that you have to behave. No, I'm good. And he goes out. He's not doing good. He's rebelling again. If to leave exile is not a beneficial for the Jewish soul, it's not beneficial, it's not doing God's will, it's rebelling against God. That is what exile is. Exile, God put us into exile to humble us, that we should be dispersed amongst the nations. There's a second issue I always mentioned, Rabbi Shamshin Refohurst, the head of German Jewry, who stood in to fight the cancer to Jews. This Zionism is a cancer to Jewish people. And the ones that prior to that actually Zionism comes from, is called Reform Judaism. Reform was like 300 years ago, 250, 300, where they said, we're going to reform the religion. What do you mean reform? It's yours? God has a blueprint, gave us a Torah. It's from God. You can't reform. You can't change one letter. It says so in the Torah. So how do they dare? But these guys, they were scholars, some of them, but they were rotten apples. They were evil. So they said, Moses gave the Torah. It doesn't have with God. It wasn't from God. And we can pick and choose what we want, what's convenient. But why? And they became very popular in Europe, Reform Judaism. But you would ask yourself, how could people think that it's kosher, that it's halal, that it's acceptable? I mean, they're saying that you're not going to keep the Torah. I mean, people died for that in the Inquisition. And how would somebody accept? What they did, they were not silly, because the Satan is smart. He always tries to make a person sin by fooling them. So what did they do? They made a rabbinate. They made, and they ordained ministers, rabbis. They made the synagogues. They called them temples, and they made it look kosher. They made it look like it's acceptable, that it's godly. they have their own rabbis, and the rabbi says it's okay to eat pig. The rabbi says you can drive in the car on Sabbath. So it's popular, and it makes the Jew feel comfortable because they say you don't have to dress like a Jew, you can assimilate, which was their will to assimilate Jews in the greater society, in the Christian society. So their ministers would they have an organ in their temples, which on the Sabbath, and play an organ, which is forbidden. It's reaching the laws of the Sabbath. They dress like a priest, on and on and on. And yet they became popular that it's the majority of Jews today are Reform. They were the ones who, they've totally estranged themselves from Judaism, yet they call themselves a branch of Judaism. It's ridiculous beyond words. It's not a branch of Judaism. Yet, this is the fact that they refer to themselves as such. Now, from them, they were going on their way for around 100 years, but they weren't successful in stopping anti-Semitism. Why? Because it's the Almighty who rules the world. And anti-Semitism, just like a tsunami, a flood, a plague, everything comes from God, prosperity and poorness. So when God, everything is a warning from God to remind a person to repent and to do what's proper. So God sends punishment, that we were exiled, that we're sent in the decree from a king that we're driven from the land, or whatever it may be. It didn't come from that king. It was the will of the Almighty. The king will be punished for doing evil, but it's the will of the Almighty that the Jews should experience, and the other people of the world. But to us, I'm referring to the issue of Judaism, that we should remember to remind us to repent. So in our law books, the Shulchan Aruch, it says, when the God forbid is a plague, anything, or a decree from the king, the rabbis gather the people together in the synagogue, and they talk to them about what we have to be introspective, what the community is doing wrong, how they should better themselves, give more charity, and they fast and so forth. And then after all of that, they'll approach the king, the leader, and try to placate them and plead with them for the will. That is what Judaism is. Zionism is taking this and turning everything on its head. Instead of accepting that this exile is this decree of God, and that we are dispersed amongst the nations to break our holiness, and God put us under oath not to attempt to leave exile, because it's what God wants, that we should be dispersed to break our holiness. At the same time, God is perfect, and so He wanted us dispersed amongst the nations, that we should, if we are ideally serving God properly, that we should teach a person as to mirror God, to emulate God. Just as God is compassionate, you should be compassionate, and people should learn from that. But so again, that's what the Jewish person is supposed to be in the land. Never to make any attempts to leave exile, because it brings the opposite result. Because we are warned by God, if you attempt to leave exile, King Solomon writes this in his prophecy, then you will be hunted like animals. That's what now the Zionists came along. These were people. Theodor Herzl and all these and his cohorts, they were children and grandchildren mostly from the Reform movement. They were totally estranged from God and from Judaism. So the first generation, or two generations, had attempted to change Judaism, to make it, reform it, that you should be assimilated, not practicing. And you should live amongst the nations just like anybody else, and not practicing the religion. Zionism came along and said, that's not working for us. We're still, our neighbors goes into the bar, gets drunk, and says, you dirty Jew. That's a fact. And they had the Dreyfus trial, which took place in the time by Theodor Herzl, where Captain Dreyfus, a French captain, was accused of espionage. And there was some astute and very sharp, which I'm embarrassed I don't remember the name. Maybe you remember the name of this reporter.
I don't remember.
With the Z, and he said something's fishy here with this story. So he started delving into this case, and he saw that that the only reason they picked this captain and accused him of espionage is because they found a letter of somebody telling secrets to the Germans, whatever, and he said, so they accused this captain of doing it, but they picked him because he was Jewish. So he started writing about this, and there became a whole debate in the French media, and a lot of anti-Semitism swam to the surface. So Theodor Herzl came. It was only an excuse of the Satan. He said, you see, assimilation is not working for us. The solution is we're going to make our own country, our own state, and that is how we'll be protected. So that was his excuse, their excuse for creating this new state of Israel, the Jewish sovereignty. But we as a Jew say, first of all, that's not what's protecting us. Protect us is only God. Secondly, God told us that you can't do. As a Jew, you're not allowed to attempt to leave exile. You're not allowed to return en masse to the Holy Land. You're not allowed to rebel against any nation. You're not, and the third oath, which says you're not allowed to make any attempt to leave exile. So this concept of gathering together the Jews is expressly forbidden. It's a non-starter. You can't do that. But they, of course, laughed at the religious Jews because these were a bunch of atheists and sinners. So that's one issue. The second, on top of that, we have to add that a Jew is required to show gratitude for good done for us. For instance, Moses, it says God, by the 10th, smited the Egyptians with 10 plagues. One of the first plagues, and one of the first plague that he gave them was that the water in the Nile turned to blood. Now Moses, the Pharaoh had put a decree that they should kill all the male Jewish children. But his mother and his sister, Moshe Rabbeinu, they took Miriam Yocheved, they took him and they put him in a wicker basket and put him in the Nile to protect him.
Ele tá, desculpa. O que ele falou agora?
He's talking about the history. Ele está falando sobre a história de Moisés.
Ah, sim.
De Mariam e Moisés.
Sim, que deixou ele
numa cesta.
Sim, maravilhoso.
So when the Almighty said to Moshe Rabbeinu, to Moses, that you should smite the water, it should turn into water, he said, I can't smite the water. It's what hid me, kept me alive.
Yeah.
We teach this, every child we teach this to. That's in the beginning of education. We teach children you have to always show appreciation. Imagine, not only to water, not only to a human being, and certainly to a human being. Now, when we were being harassed and murdered in Europe by the Christian society, they tried to convert the Jews into Christianity, and we died. We were burnt at the stake by the Inquisition and on. So the Muslim countries were the ones that took the Jews in. They embraced the Jews. They gave us a safe haven. Throughout the Muslim world, Iran, Iraq, Tunisia, Morocco, Egypt, wherever you are, and in Palestine, which was under the Ottoman Empire. So we as a Jew are required to show gratitude, never forget, and show gratitude for this. So how dare, but the Zionists, in order to create their Zionist state, they have to have an excuse why they're hounding and they're harassing the Palestinian people. So to the world, this is before smartphones.
Quer que eu explique para o senhor?
Sim, não, essa questão que ele está falando sobre a relação do sionismo, não é? Eu acho. Essa é uma questão muito importante que eu queria.
Sobre a gratidão também, que ele diz o seguinte, que Moisés, quando Deus pediu para ele bater o cajado na água, ele disse, mas como é que eu vou bater o cajado na água do Rio Nilo, se quando eu era bebê foi a água do Rio Nilo que me protegeu?
Sim.
Então esse princípio de gratidão, ele é supremo no judaísmo.
Sim.
Então como é que os sionistas pegam um povo que protegeu os judeus ao longo da história,
que viveu...
Exato, como os muçulmanos de vários países, como ele citou, né? O Irã, o Marrocos, o Egito, vários lugares que receberam judeus fugindo da Europa. Como é que a gente pega esse princípio de gratidão do judaísmo e faz com os muçulmanos o que está fazendo?
Esse também era mais uma pergunta, Rabino, que eu queria...
This is another question that he will
que eu queria fazer para o senhor, era sobre a relação entre o sionismo e o judaísmo. Em relação... a gente percebe o quanto esse movimento anti-sionismo está crescendo no mundo, né? Especialmente nos Estados Unidos.
Sim.
Né? Como é que eles, como judeus, se sentem estando no meio do furacão, né? No olho do furacão? Sendo judeus e seus principais inimigos, outros judeus com outra ideologia.
Yeah, he's asking you that as a Jew, you see that the anti-Zionism movement is growing, especially in the United States between the Jewish community. But of course, you are already from an anti-Zionist movement, and so it put you in the center of a hurricane. So how you see this changing on opinion and this pressure that's now coming from both sides? And now, you, as a anti-Zionist Jews, representing this path of changing.
Porque a gente,
Yeah, but let me-
a gente,
yeah.
só uma, a gente,
Just a minute, he said.
a gente sabe que os sionistas não perdoam.
Yeah,
né?
he's saying that the Zionists don't forgive Jews who don't upheld.
Eles
the-
são assim com os judeus também.
They are like this with the anti-Zionist Jews. They are, behaving harshly with them. Also.
Yes, yeah. But first, let me just finish. I was
Sim,
explaining
claro.
Yeah.
that there's, besides the in essence, the root of Zionism is blasphemy, is heresy, because it says where's God.
As partes
They
importantes você traduz, não tem
Pode
problema.
ficar tranquilo.
and then when it comes into fruition, when it became the state, so now they're rebelling against God, because God, besides that you're not allowed to kill and steal, and you have to be kind, you have to emulate God, but there's special oaths of God when in regard to the concept of exile, that we're not allowed to return en masse, we're not allowed to rebel against nations, and we're not allowed to make any attempt to end exile. And Zionism, in one fell swoop, in their whole concept of making the state of Israel, they breach all these three, because God foresaw there would be such a thing. They say you should return en masse. They encourage aliyah, they call it, to go up. They rebel against the peoples of the land and all the Muslim countries and the people of Palestine, and they call themselves as Chalta de Gula, beginning of redemption, where God warns us, do not attempt to leave exile, and they call themselves the beginning of redemption. That's how they refer to themselves, and they play emotional music when they advertise their country. We were 2,000 years in exile, and now we're leaving, and God is taking us back. So they're using the totally rebelling against every concept of God and the laws of God. That's why all the rabbis stood in opposition to that. And the other issue on top of that is, which I mentioned, that a Jew is required to show gratitude and thankfulness. And it was the land of Palestine, it was the Ottoman Empire, and all the other Arab lands that and Muslim lands that were the ones who took in the Jews. So how dare the Zionists, in order to create their state, so they have to make a narrative that the people hate them, instead of saying thank you and you've been so kind to us, and there were no human rights groups to protect us, and yet we flourished in your countries, they vilify them and call them anti-Semitic. You hate Jews and honor. And just to show you, I like to, this is when they made the state, to show who we're dealing with. These are the fathers of Zionism. This is Ben Gurion reading the Declaration of Independence in Independence Hall in 1948, the most historical moment. They're reading the Declaration of their independence, and they're making a so-called Jewish state. Here's the Star of David. This is a picture of Theodor Herzl, who's not covering his head, and most of them, almost entirely, they're not covering the head. They don't have beards. Imagine they're making a state that's called Jewish, and if it would be a Muslim state, you would have imams, ayatollahs. Yeah, if it would be a Christian state, you would have priests, because it's a Christian state. They're making a Jewish state. They don't have rabbis. They don't have religious people here. How could you call this a Jewish state? It's insulting the world. It's an insult to the world when that insult to their intelligence. Yet it's the works of Satan, and this is how they made the state. And the Jewish communities, from day one, they were not fooled by that. The rabbis spoke up. They said, this is evil. And the chief rabbi of Palestine. Now the Zionists made a state, so they made the star. They used the Star of David. Not only the Star of David, but they also made a rabbinate, just like the Reform. They made a rabbinate. Until today, they have two chief rabbis for the Sephardic community and the Ashkenaz community. And they traipse around the world, and everything they do, you're not allowed to cut down olive trees, it's fruit trees. They explain everything. You're allowed to do that. You're allowed to kill. You're allowed to steal. He comes, Nathaniel puts on a yarmulke sometimes, and he says, "Oh, they're like Amalek in the Bible," and everything they do is in so rooted and so is one rebellion, one big colossal rebellion against God, and the ultimate misinterpretation and misconstruing and the Torah to a vulgar degree. And like I always carry around with me the chief rabbi who was of the real Jewish community that was living there for hundreds of years, a God-fearing community. As I said, they blow the shofar. People today can remember how they blew the shofar and every Friday afternoon, and all the stores would close. Nobody dared to have an open store on the Sabbath. 2 hours before the Sabbath around, they would close every store. And so the chief rabbi of Palestine at the time, in 1947, before they made the state, he said to the United Nations, "We furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine." And this was to the United Nations. In other words, maybe the United Nations will tell them, take the whole land, it's yours. They said, we don't want this. We don't want a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. And this was, the chief rabbis of the Sephardic communities, as I brought Arresala and all these others. Here you have the picture of Ben Zion Chazan of blessed memory. He went out in 1948 with a white flag to the Jordanians to take the Jews of the old city of Jerusalem. He went out and he said, here's my, we are standing under your leadership. And the Zionists said to the community, you must come with us and fight with the Arabs. What did they do? He went out to the flag, ignored them. What did they do? They killed our rabbis. They shot, he had a bullet till he died. He had a bullet in his foot, in his leg. Just one of the many, of course. And when he passed on, we had, you can see that from then on, the Jews in Palestine never gave up. He passed on. You see the tens of thousands of Jews taking up another.
É a comunidade do movimento dentro de Israel, essas imagens.
Yeah, he's asking if this is the images of the early Jewish reactions in the state of Israel, the early Jewish community.
Of course,
Sim.
before
São
the
contrários, né?
Before the state started, not only from before the state started, and they were demonstrating as soon as Zionism came, because before the Arabs knew who the Zionists were. In fact, the Arab people were always our kind neighbors. So when the Zionists started coming, they bought land and they sold them land, the Arab neighbors, because they just thought that just like the rest of the Jews who were living there for hundreds of years, they're good neighbors. Why not sell them? But all of a sudden they became aware that this is with a plan to take over control of the land. That's when it started in Der Yassin, the destruction in Der Yassin, that the Zionists started. First they bought, and then they started harassing and killing people who were the best neighbors. I used to remember rabbis who are not alive today anymore, but they lived there at the time, and they would grit their teeth when they would talk about it. It was so painful. When they talked about what happened in Der Yassin and the other communities, they said, our beautiful neighbors, and they were so kind to us. How dare the Zionists, the Jews lived together in total peace. They babysat each other's children. Just the other day, I'm here with a very fine lady, Andriana, who just heard a rabbi who gave a speech, who stated, he said, he's a Palestinian Jew. He said his mother, she's in her 90s. She's a neighbor of mine in New York. She's lived 120. She's talked about how they babysat the children of the Muslims babysat their children. They lived in the same courtyards. And when the Zionists took over, then they refused to, the Zionists till today, they tried to take over the communities and give funding to the Jewish community. So when right after the occupation started, the Jews were starving. They didn't have any income. They didn't have it. So when the Zionists came and they offered to pay them, and they refused to take a penny, the Jewish community. Until today, we have organizations around the world, because we don't, the ones who do not take money from the state of Israel, because they pay for education, they pay for socialized medicine. Our communities, the chief rabbi of Palestine, who was after him, his name was Rabbi Teitelbaum, set up a fund called Keren Hatzolah, the fund to save, where we around the world, we collect money and give money to the Jewish people who are living under the occupation, who refuse to take any funding from the state of Israel. And at that time, people were dying from hunger, literally dying from hunger, and they refused to take a piece of bread from the Zionists. One rabbi told me, again, he's not alive already. He's Rabbi Cohen, Rabbi Yitzchak David Cohen of blessed memory. He lived in London. He also picked up and took his whole family of many children and moved away. He didn't want to be under the occupation. He told me that they came and they offered, and his brother Moshe YISROEL moved to New York. They both are not alive today. They said they were at the time in living in the old city in 1948, and they came, and after they were under the rule of the Jordanians that treated them. They took care of. They brought them milk for the children. A child disappeared. They looked all over for him. They took care of them beautifully. After the war, they went and they transported them over to the side of Israel. The rabbi said, we were like sheep. We didn't know. They took us, they put us the other side. We sort of...
Essa última parte você pode só traduzir, essa
Sim.
última história?
Então,
dele?
ele está contando, em resumo, porque o Rabino, você sabe que ele é uma enciclopédia.
Sim,
I will translate for him because he wants to understand this last part. Ele está dizendo que dentro, né, da história inicial do Estado de Israel, quando ele começou a ser construído, os judeus cuidavam ainda das crianças muçulmanas e davam, assim, toda a assistência e foram muito contra os judeus que moravam na Palestina.
Contra a
fundação do Estado de Israel. Enviaram várias cartas aos britânicos e ficaram impressionados com a selvageria que foi implementada sobre os palestinos, por exemplo, na vila de Deir Yassin. Ele disse que os rabinos chegavam a ranger os dentes quando contavam as histórias horríveis do que tinham sido feitos com seus vizinhos árabes, né? E que até quando a Jordânia foi ajudar, né, os palestinos naquele período da formação do Estado de Israel, ele disse que os jordanianos ajudavam a proteger as crianças judias, os judeus de Jerusalém, que eram judeus antisionistas, ajudavam a proteger as crianças árabes. Então você tinha toda aquela relação, né, de proteção, de irmandade que ainda existia naquela...
De convivência, na verdade.
Naquele período inicial da formação ali do projeto sionista. Então, assim...
Agora, when they transferred, when they put them over to the other side afterwards, after the war, so where are they going to put all these families? So they found this hole, that hole, they put them in the Meah She'arim mostly in different places. So then they came and they brought furniture for them, the Zionists. The rabbi said they refused to take a piece of wood. They said, where did you take this wood? Where did you get it from? You stole it from the Arabs. They refused to take anything from them. Mrs. Rabbitson Beck, this lady we were speaking about before, who's in the 90s, she lived to 120. She said they had a family of well over 10 children, I think 15 children. And in our Jews, we don't have family planning, so they have very large families. They would take a loaf of bread and cut it into teeny little pieces. And they were literally starving. Children, their bellies swelled from hunger, but they would not take money or anything from the Zionists. And that is still today.
Ele está falando, ele está dizendo o quê? Que quando o Estado de Israel se formou, né, roubando as coisas dos palestinos, roubando as propriedades dos palestinos, não são mais seus bens, os sionistas, para tentar ganhar os judeus antisionistas de Jerusalém, o que eles fizeram? Colocaram eles em bairros especiais e começaram a fornecer para eles dinheiro e móveis para as casas deles que tinham sido roubados dos palestinos. Ele disse que os rabinos proibiram nem que fosse um pedacinho de madeira para colocar dentro de casa que tivesse sido roubado dos seus vizinhos muçulmanos.
A gente fez um vídeo. Sim.
Since then we are demonstrating.
São
we are
judeus.
demonstrating in the streets for over 77 years. Since even from the beginning of Zionism, we have pictures. The first martyr was Dr. Dahan in the 1924. But we're always demonstrating. The world is silent. The world doesn't say a word. They're beating Jews. They're killing, assassinating rabbis. The military. It's not just police. And what are these Jews doing? They're standing in the streets and saying, unacceptable. You are not representing Judaism. You have no right to
É só falar que não concorda com eles.
Exato, que eles atacam. Ele inclusive falou que nesse período os judeus ortodoxos da cidade de Jerusalém que lutavam pelos palestinos também passaram fome, né? E suas crianças ficaram desnutridas porque eles tiveram seus meios de subsistência cortados, mas mesmo assim não quiseram ajudar o Estado de Israel e pegar nada dele. Então ele disse que os pais dividiam até pães e migalhas para os filhos, mas não aceitavam, e agora, até hoje, esse sofrimento continua, porque eles se recusam, mesmo em estado de necessidade, de pobreza, de qualquer coisa, porque é proibido no judaísmo utilizar bens roubados das pessoas. Então eles fazem isso.
They get arrested. Every boy and girl who turns 17 is a criminal. Because they refuse to serve in their army.
Ele está dizendo que até os jovens judeus, né, lá em Jerusalém, que se recusam a servir quando chega a idade de 17 anos no exército, eles são presos, tanto meninas judias quanto meninos judios.
Tudo isso como forma de pressão.
Exato, de pressão.
Sim.
Exato, contra eles por se recusar, né, a servir.
Sim, tudo como
I'm
pressão.
reading
Isso.
this rabbi, just one example, Moshe Aaron.
Ele tá falando agora da história do Moshe Aaron.
He's sitting in prison 5 years. He has a family of, I think, 5 children or more.
Yeah.
Nothing, because he stood and demonstrated for no other reason.
Ele tá falando desse rabino que é um preso político, Moshe Aaron, que está preso, né, pelos sionistas 5 anos, tem 5 filhos e não pode, né, sustentar sua família que passa necessidade, porque o que tá preso por fazer nada além de o que objeção política e protesto,
Ao
nada
Estado,
violento
sim.
ao Estado sionista.
They spray them.
Se eles fazem isso, irmão, na verdade, com a própria comunidade judaica,
Sim.
então os massacres que eles cometeram contra outros seguidores e outras religiões, com certeza
Sim.
não significa que é justificável,
Sim.
mas é o que menos se espera, né?
He's saying that if they do this with their own Jewish community, what they will do with the non-Jewish community is
Pois é.
horrible.
E
It's
aí-
something that
But I
is-
think
Sim.
they hate us worse. Than they are much more dangerous to them than the non-Jewish, because we undermine the legitimacy. Their whole excuse in the world is because they're saying God gave them the land. And our rabbis, our communities are saying you're bogus. It's false. You're a bunch of sinners. You're a bunch of charlatans. You hijacked the religion and you're counterfeiting the religion. You're using a false identity. So they hate, when we want to speak in universities, they put everything they can to not allow us, that the universities shouldn't allow us to speak. They're afraid because we show their true colors. We show the king without clothes.
Sim. A gente sempre falava, irmão, não sei se ele concorda, né? Você pode perguntar para ele, que a comunidade judaica é a primeira vítima do sionismo.
He's saying that he's always talking that the first victims of Zionism was the Jewish community.
São as-
They were the first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
E aí eu queria migrar um pouco para outra questão, que é o de 7 de outubro,
Yes.
né? O que ele acha sobre o 7 de outubro?
Yeah, he's migrating to another question
Oh
about
yes,
your
I
opinion.
apologize.
Okay. Yeah,
You
ele quer
had-
acrescentar só mais
one
um
second.
ponto.
You wanted to you asked the second question. First of all, let's go over the questions. If I answer
Yeah,
the first one
yeah.
and go to the second one that
Yeah,
you wanted to ask,
yeah.
I didn't answer.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, he's saying that ele disse que ele ainda não respondeu a segunda pergunta antes da gente começar essa, e ele quer responder ela agora.
Claro,
Pode ser?
claro.
Yeah, okay,
So
of
what
course.
was the
It was the pressure that has the anti-Zionist Jews are feeling now with the growing of their own opinion between all the Jews.
Right,
Majority are
yes,
now
yeah.
turning opinion.
Okay, yeah. So I have to always turn to our great rabbis. So the chief rabbi of Palestine, his name was Rabbi Yoel Teitelbaum of blessed memory. He was after Rabbi Dushinsky that I showed you here. He moved. He was originally from Romania, and we went through the Holocaust and so forth. And he was taken as a chief rabbi in Palestine because he was above and beyond other rabbis in his wisdom, in his holiness, in his kindness, charity, beyond belief what he did. And therefore, he was the greatest fighter, one of the greatest fighters against Zionism. And he himself moved to New York with the title Chief Rabbi of Jerusalem and of Palestine. He moved to New York and to Williamsburg, Brooklyn. That's right across from Manhattan, the largest concentration of religious Jews besides in Jerusalem and besides Al-Quds. And he urged his followers that they should leave all the time. He said, because by being there, you're giving support, maybe, you don't know, to the Zionist entity. Not everybody could leave, and many hundreds of thousands stayed there, anti-Zionist, but many left because of them, moved to the United States, to Canada, to England, and so forth. We moved, Jews, because of his urging. Now, he lived in New York, and they tried to assassinate him, the Zionists. And once a rabbi came to him and he said to him, you know, how do you have the courage or the strength or that you're able to, you're fighting Zionism? You should do what other people do. Just close your mouth, run your community, make sure that they should keep kosher, Sabbath, do what they should do. But why are you speaking out so much against the state of Israel? You know, they're the majority, because most Jews are not religious, and the Zionists, even of course, the Zionists have ensnared some religious Jews, that what they call modern Orthodox, the ones who are their religion is compromised. That's the ones who the settlers, Smutrich, Ben Gvir, all these people are what they call modern Orthodox. So they keep the Sabbath. So they're not Reformed Jews, they're called, but they're just as much sinners and even worse than the Reformed Jews. But these are the settlers, and most of the settlers come from non-religious families or marginally religious. Not from the very religious, but at the end of the day, the majority. So he asked him, how could you speak up against them? Why aren't you afraid? So he said, I'm with the majority. I'm with so he said, I'm with God. He said, the Almighty is the all encompassing, the Almighty. So he said, I'm not afraid. I'm going to stand up and say what is truth, and we're going to not take into account or reckon with the power, the evil of the Zionists. So he urged his followers. He said, at the cost of death. He used to, in those days we didn't have video and those things, but you can hear the recording on the table. He'd bang on the table and cry, and he would say, he urged them, and he wrote in his writings that we should go out in all the streets and inform the world that Zionism and the state of Israel, it's not Judaism, and that the Jewish people around the world don't accept what they're doing. At the cost of our lives, he said. And his followers, many do go out. To a limited degree, because you have Jews in Sao Paulo. Unfortunately, they're very good Jews community here, and they're very strongly anti-Zionist because we know them. But here and other small communities, they don't go out and speak because of fear, because Jewish people have been assassinated. My life, I get calls, threats, death threats. We've been beaten. I used to wear glasses that had a split over here, and because I was proud of it.
No. He's saying that desculpa, troquei os idiomas. Ele está dizendo que os judeus antisionistas são tão perseguidos que eles são ameaçados. Até aqui em São Paulo, ele disse que tem uma comunidade antisionista, com rabinos inclusive, mas que eles não podem sair e falar porque eles são agredidos, eles podem ser assassinados. Ele falou que antes ele utilizava um óculos, né, antes dele trocar por esse, que tinha um pedaço quebrado aqui porque ele foi agredido, simplesmente.
Because I was punched.
Deram um soco nele porque ele estava falando contra o sionismo.
And this is it. This is what we're facing. When they made the PLO, the Palestinian Authority, so the chief, the rabbi, we had a rabbi who represented the Jewish community in the Palestinian Authority. His name was Rabbi Moshe Hirsch. His son is like the very vocal in Jerusalem, in Al-Quds, who leads the Torah Karta there. But he was the official representative in the PLO. President Arafat offered him like a chauffeur and a car. And he was a plane. He didn't want to know of anything. He walked on the streets of Jerusalem. But the Zionists went and they threw acid in his face and blinded him in one eye and was barely able to see from the other eye. And this is what they constantly do. They've murdered the head of Neturei Karta. We are certain because he went in for a small operation into the hospital, and within a few hours they said he died of internal bleeding. And some of them we know they assassinated. We have the pictures how they killed Rabbi Samet and Dr. Dahan. Their blood should be avenged. So people are afraid to speak up. So that's why you will find in so many communities the hundreds of thousands of Jews who are anti-Zionist, but you don't hear their voice because of the intimidation, the fear. And so so you're asking how we're affected. Yes, there's an intimidation, there's fear, but we with God's help, we feel the obligation to speak up.
So, Rabbi, let's go to our third question. You have exposed all this violence that the Zionists do against Jews, and against Palestinians. Everyone knows that they are very violent. So he's asking, on your view, how is your opinion on the what was surrounding the violence that we saw on Palestine on 7th of October? That of course many Israeli citizens were attacked. In your opinion, what caused it? This turmoil that we are unfolding almost 2 years right now.
Yeah. So, with God's help, I always say Zionism is the worst anti-Semitic entity that can be. It's the personification. I say that when they make an encyclopedia, the next print, when they write anti-Semitism, they should write as an example the state of Israel, the Zionist state of Israel. It is the textbook anti-Semitism because, first of all, I mean, before semantics, I say Palestinians are also Semites, first of all, and they're killing tens and tens of thousands and over 100,000 through the years, certainly. But beside that, they're beating Jews 77 years without any fear of reprisal about anything, and they don't care. If it was to be done once something like this, an incident like this should happen in United States or anywhere, they would be up in arms and screaming anti-Semitism, demanding a restitution to the state of Israel, by the way. Yeah. The restitution, not to the people who are harmed, but it should go to them like they do it all the time. And it's nothing. In Columbia University, actually, a few students were sprayed with. I'm trying to. It was a famous, the beginning of after October 7th, they were sprayed with chemicals, and everybody said, "What happened?" And they realized it was two Israeli. There was some Israeli students or something, or some people who came from Israel sprayed it, and it was a scandal, a little bit at least, in the Columbia University. We go to Columbia University demonstrating there tens and tens of times from the first day they started to. But I asked by the Jewish community in Palestine, they're always spraying them with these chemicals, stink water that ruins their clothes, so it discourages demonstrations and it makes them sick. But anyway, so this is a regard, to how the approach. The approach of the Zionist is to us. Again, you asked me, I went offline.
On the violence.
October 7th.
Yeah.
October 7th. So
Yeah.
October 7th it was an attack that didn't come out of, like, what did the Secretary General of the United Nations say? It just didn't come out of a vacuum. And what was he saying? He was saying just basic logic, basic common sense that everybody, any human being, that God created a person, you know how to walk, you learn to talk. And you have certain basics. When it's cold, you go into the house. When it's raining, you go into the house. It's so basic that Zionism is perpetrating a colossal crime, a Nakba. It should be by everybody basics. And it should be by everybody basics the distinction between this and anti-Semitism. It should be basics by everybody. When they saw October 7th, they should have said, you Zionists, you say it's the most blood spilled since the Holocaust. So your fault. You've just caused October 7th. They should be saying to us, enough. We gave you so many chances. 75 years you had a chance, and you said, oh, we're going to do 67-1. There's going to be the Camp David, of course. Oh, now it's better. Now it's better. Now it's better. How many chances do they need to prove their incompetence, to prove that what they're doing is a colossal failure? What they've caused, not only for the Palestinian people, but for the Jewish people, that the bloodshed that happened didn't happen because they were Jews there. It happened because they were occupying there. So who's at fault? So these Zionists, with their creation, their monster called the State of Israel, they are causing that there should be eruptions. An action brings a reaction. So that how could they should have seen this and say, this is October 7th in this year. What's going to be next year? What's going to be the year afterwards? What do you expect? You're going to oppress a people and expect that they're going to be silenced. They're going to eradicate. Now, also, he gets up, that evil person called Netanyahu, that demon, and he gets up and he says, we're going to eradicate the whole Hamas. So let's just consider what that means. They start bombing and killing everybody because Hamas, first of all, is the government over there. So it's the government. What do you mean? You're going to say you're angry at the Republicans who are now in power. So you're going to say, I'm going to eradicate the Republicans. Does that make sense? In other words, it's not a certain individual or a certain amount of individuals. It's the whole system, the integral system. So in other words, he's declared he's going to kill everybody in Gaza, basically. And not only that, but so when you kill an individual, what happens? That individual has brothers, sisters, cousins, fathers, friends. It's going to go into the depth of the heart. They're just going to take it and be silent. He is the worst monster for Jews. He's creating enemies out of roses. He's making into cactuses. There could be nothing worse than this demon. But he's just the head of the den of thieves. It's the whole Zionist state of Israel.
Ele falou o seguinte, que dentro, né, do Estado de Israel é tanta violência, estou resumindo obviamente, tanta violência estrutural contra os palestinos, que você acabou transformando rosas, que eram os palestinos com relação aos judeus, em cactos, cheios de espinhos. Porque as pessoas que eles matam, né, os sionistas, elas têm irmãos, elas têm pais, elas têm filhos, e elas vão procurar, às vezes, justiça por aquilo que elas sofrem. Então, ele está dizendo assim que o mundo e os palestinos eram tantas oportunidades para os sionistas pararem com a violência, mas eles nunca param. Então, quando você empurra um povo assim, o que você acha que vai acontecer?
A gente sente que é claro e é muito óbvio essa ideologia expansionista, né? De Israel, né? Dizem que Israel tem o grande Israel, pega uma parte existe isso, né? Então eles nunca vão parar.
So he said that the Zionists will never stop. They have this dream for building a very great Israel, and so they will never stop. They will continue to oppress and expanding.
E ao longo de 77 anos,
and
não sei se
for
ele concorda,
77 years,
talvez Israel foi o único país que travou tantas guerras ali na região.
So in the course of 70 years, Israel was the only country who engaged in so many wars in the region.
Com Egito, com Síria,
with Egypt, with Syria, with Iraq,
Líbano,
with Lebanon,
o Irã recentemente,
with Iran
também, né?
most recently. So it's the country that have the most large record of engaging in war.
E eles sempre justificam como se
and
o problema é a nossa existência. Nós estamos defendendo a nossa existência.
As if the problem were not the violence, but their own existence. They're defending their existence, but not looking for the other end of the things. It's the violence that they are perpetrating.
And what are they defending? What is their existence? An ideology, a philosophy, not a people. As a people, Jews were living in this beautiful fabric of the Holy Land. Jews and Muslims with distinctly different religions and Christians. It was never an impediment to coexistence. We live together. But they have this concept of their selfish, flawed ideology of their Israel, their so-called Judaism. And in order to have that solidified, they're ready to sacrifice on the altar of their Zionism the lives of anybody and anything that stands in its way. It's beyond, it's an insult again to the intelligence of the world that they should be supporting this and allowing it to continue for one moment more, because it is so evil and so nonsensical. It doesn't make sense. Here they speak. Let's just understand what they're saying. They say to the world, we need this insurance policy. We need a land. Jews suffered so much. We need a land for our protection. Then they turn around to the world and they say, excuse me, Mr. United States, please give me some nuclear bombs, because we're at such a danger, because we're surrounded by 70 wolves. The sheep is surrounded by 70 wolves. See, you concentrated all the Jews in one area, and there's such a thing called a nuclear bomb. God forbid, we don't even want to think what could happen if God forbid. So you put the Jews in the most greatest danger possible by concentrating them in one area, and that's your insurance policy. That's your insurance policy. The stupidity of this, and the same mouth that says this is an insurance policy is demanding from the world protection against the 70 wolves around them. Please. But we see it's the works of Satan. It's a satanic concept that it's able to go on, that the United Nations ratified and accepted to create the state of Israel when there were three identities there. There was Muslims, Christians, and Jews. The largest were Muslim community. The second was the Christian, and the third were the Jews. putting aside that the Jewish community was God-fearing and they were against Zionism, but let's just say conceptually that if they would have wanted a Zionist state, a state of Israel, but by accepting to create the state of Israel, you are asking for blood, because you're making the name State of Israel means everybody who's living under the state, who is Muslims, are second-class citizens. So what are you asking? It's you have 3 children, and you say, you I love, you not so much.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Ele além de fazer várias analogias com o que está acontecendo, o ponto principal da fala é a estupidez de você dizer que o Estado de Israel é uma espécie de seguro para os judeus, quando você, na verdade, está concentrando todos os judeus num lugar só e começando a falar de guerra nuclear. Ou seja, você tem... O projeto, no fim, é suicida. Você tem uma forma de você extinguir todos os judeus, enfiando eles num lugar só e começar a guerrear com todo mundo.
Eu já ouvi de alguns judeus falando que é o lugar mais inseguro para eles.
Ele fala isso direto também.
É isso mesmo.
O Rabino fala isso direto.
Que é Israel.
Sim,
né?
sim.
Agora, trazendo esse conceito, né, da boa convivência, da harmonia entre os judeus e a comunidade muçulmana ao longo de décadas ali na região do Oriente Médio, a gente sabe que tem uma comunidade judaica no Irã. Ele já visitou já? Será que ele já visitou?
Okay. Eu acho que essa é a última pergunta, tá? Pode
ser? Sim, pode ser.
This is the last question because of lack of time that we have. So he's saying that you yourself have visited Iran and on the...
E aí eu queria perguntar para ele como é que ele vê o papel da Revolução Islâmica do Irã para com a comunidade judaica, para com a causa palestina e de uma forma mais específica o papel do imã Khamenei.
Yes. So he's asking that, of course, there are many Jews who live in Iran, and they are for many decades, living together with Jews, and you travel to there and you saw by your own eyes yourself, and how you see this society where there are many Muslims and Jews and they live together, and in your opinion, the Islamic revolution that happened in Iran, that gave all this new environment for Jews to live in Iran. What is your opinion about what you saw? Because it's not like a theory you saw by your own eyes.
With the help of the Almighty, we don't have enough words to praise the care and the respect and the protection the Islamic Republic of Iran provided for the Jewish people, what I'm talking is I've heard this I met with the rabbis of the community, members of the community, and the facts on the ground. For instance, the Islamic Republic of Iran, when they have a certain amount of I forget how many million people live in Iran. I should know. It's embarrassing, but there's many.
90 milhões. O Irã tem uma população de 90 milhões.
90 million. And God protect them, and the Jewish populace is around 25,000, they say, around. So it's not deserving in Parliament of a representative for such a small number. Yet it's a requirement that they should have a voice in Parliament, so they have a representative in Parliament. Jewish people are required to have for our services to have wine. Islamic gets against Islamic rule, but the Jewish people are allowed to have wine. I can go on and on. The Jewish people, but my experience personally, so we went there many times, thank God, and of course I met with the community leaders, the rabbis, who are strongly anti-Zionist and very and God-fearing, fine people. I'm overwhelmed by them. I go there, and each time we go to the synagogues, and it's always a pleasure. When we go, we see that I go to European countries, a lot of them are afraid even to have the name of the synagogue outside. They're afraid to write it's a Jewish thing. Why? Because what Zionism has created such evil, such a nakba, such a catastrophe, that people are afraid to show they're Jewish. Because of our Savior Zionist state of Israel. So the people are afraid to show they're Jewish because the hate they've made. because people don't know to differentiate between Judaism and Zionism. You go to Iran, and they have the synagogues and with the names. I went every single day. I would go to the synagogue over there, and people are sitting and learning a whole day over there, which as a Jew is supposed to sit and learn. And the people on the street, wherever I went, are always concerned. They always come over to me. Oh, everything's okay. I go to a kiosk. I only had some dollars and I had to buy something. Before I turn around, somebody's coming. They want to pay for what I needed this is the will of the people, the friendship. It's so beautiful. It's beyond words. And I say this, and everybody else who I know who goes there says this. And of course, Zionists hate Iran because why? Because from day one, Ayatollah Khomeini, when he started the revolution, he got up and he said, there is a difference between Judaism and Zionism. Judaism is to be respected, and he immediately went and saw that the Jewish have the synagogues and so forth. Zionism is totally evil. Now he went so far, more than even I and other people do, is that he doesn't say State of Israel. They refuse to even give it that legitimacy of calling it Israel. He respects the name Israel so much that they call it the Zionist state, the Zionist entity. That hurts the Zionists so much because they know that they know their number. Iran knows who they are, and they refuse to be enticed into saying the Jews or something. They call it the Jewish state. The Zionist state, because they refuse to let that people should be able to accuse them of being anti-Semitic, because they don't confuse the two. So that is the beauty of what Iran, and that's why Iran is so hated by the Zionists, and that's why we are so thankful to the wife of the leader of Neturei Karta, who I mentioned before, Rabbi Amram Blau of blessed memory, who was certain that the Zionists killed him. She went to visit Ayatollah Khomeini, and I met with the honor and privilege of meeting Ayatollah Khomeini, and the presidents, for many presidents already I've gone to visit, and altogether the leader, the religious leadership there, and communities one after the other, and we went to visit the tombs of Daniel, who was in Shush, in Hamadan. We went to Mordechai and Esther, and each place you go, you can see the respect that they're given there. And that is something to speak about, because the Zionists, they have absolutely no respect for the dead. As a Jew believes in God, and he believes that there's a sanctity of the body because God created, and they are busy digging up graves. They want to make a highway, Kavush 6 it's called. Any highway, so they have to make an extension to a highway. There's a cemetery in the way. Who cares? Just they dig it up. In all the Muslim countries and in Iran, you see the beautiful way that they put tapestry over and beautiful cut glass over the tombs of these great, of the Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, different tombs and everything. Everything is held with the greatest esteem, and the Muslims come and pray there also. We don't pray to the dead. We pray that they should pray for us and in the merit of this prophet. So that's what's held. I can mention also in Egypt, there's called a ring road. That because Cairo, the traffic is terrible, so they made a highway that goes around. It's called a ring road. And in order to make this road, it had to pass through a Jewish cemetery. Jews lived there for hundreds and hundreds of years, and so what they did was they didn't want to disturb the graves, so they built pillars, and they built it on pillars not to disturb. Nobody talks about that, but that's what they did. It cost millions of dollars. And that's a given. You don't disturb the graves, and that's the respect that you find by the Arabs and Muslim people of the Jewish graves and of anybody's graves, but the way they protect the Jewish people and everything holy. While in Israel, they have absolutely no regard and no respect. They make forced autopsies. When somebody dies, we send people to the hospitals, special groups of people, because the minute somebody dies, we know they could, in a second, they'll take out and they'll cut out their organs for studying purposes, which is forbidden according to Judaism. In every country, they give us the respect. God forbid if somebody dies, even though if they want to make an autopsy, they'll see not to if it's a Jewish person, because it's forbidden by us. I have these pictures, so many different pictures, how Jews are sitting in the scoops of the tractors, because they're here. because they're digging up the graves, and they have to protect them, so they go and they get bloodied and beaten. Right now, while we're here speaking here, there's a town called Yaud. I think I'm pronouncing it right. It's in occupied Palestine. They're busy beating Jews there because they're demonstrating there because of the graves, and nobody says a word. Again, any other country this would happen, the Zionists would be there screaming anti-Semitism. So Zionism is satanic. It's that the world created the state is unacceptable. It doesn't make sense. United Nations that was created to adjudicate and bring peace to the world, that they should be to adjudicate any conflict through peaceful means, because it was after World War I they created it, right after World War II, and they made it that there should be no more death. And here they ratify to make this Palestine into a state of Israel that should make a bloodbath. And then you can say, how could it be the United Nations, so many esteemed and the leaders of the world, they could make a mistake. Didn't they for tens of years approve and accept the South Africa apartheid? And the ones who opposed them were called terrorists. Nelson Mandela was 27 years in prison. So the ones who they gave the greatest respect to South Africa. That was an apartheid government that said the blacks are second class. So you see, they can make a mistake. Israel is their greatest mistake. They have to rectify this. It must be rectified. It's satanic that the world can watch every day that people are starving and going and asking for food, and they're being shot and killed. How could the world be silent? So it doesn't make sense. It's only satanic. But we have to remember that God is the Almighty, greater than the Satan, and everybody should pray to God to bring a speedy and total, and God help, peaceful removal of this satanic existence, the Zionist state of Israel, entirely removed. It will end. In the Torah it says, why are you rebelling against me? It will not be successful. The state of Israel will end entirely. We don't know when, but God's word, so we should pray. But at the same time, until God, with his compassion, brings that about, everybody has to do their utmost to save the people of Gaza, save the people of Palestine. People made remembrances for the Holocaust. Why? Not just because it was a part of history. No, that it shouldn't happen again. And the Zionists, what do? They take the Holocaust and they conflate it in all the Holocaust memories. Yad Vashem, they're busy with the Star of David, you should therefore support the state of Israel. So the Satan took the ashes of my grandparents who were killed in Auschwitz, who died as religious Jews, anti-Zionists. They're using them to rebel against God, to kill people. It's unacceptable. And the world should remember, the world doesn't have to buy into the Zionist remembrance of the Holocaust. They should remember that people regret and have guilt that they were silent by the Holocaust. Now is the opportunity to stand up and say, never again. We cannot accept this. This cannot, not let the Zionists use the word never again for their vile occupation. Stand up and stop it somehow. Put pressure on the politicians. Who stopped the apartheid? God, obviously. But it was through the works of the grassroots who put pressure and made like mosquitoes, made their leaders uncomfortable. Till finally they said, we can't deal with them anymore. So they finally stopped it. We have to keep on having the politicians know that God gifted them with power. They must use that power for what's right, what's godly, because they're going to have to answer to God. One day they're going to answer to God. I gave you money. Did you give charity? I gave you power. Did you use that power just for your end goal for respect?
Sim.
Or did you use that to save lives?
Essa última parte, se você puder só traduzir.
Então, mas aí eu vou fazer um resumo muito grande. Ele está falando que assim, é muito importante, né, o que aconteceu na viagem dele para o Irã, isso é um resumo, que ele viu muitas coisas sagradas que são respeitadas no judaísmo lá, o túmulo de Mordecai, o túmulo de Esther, o túmulo de outros rabinos são muito respeitados lá. As sinagogas, ele disse que todos os dias foi na sinagoga quando esteve no Irã. E uma das coisas que ele disse é a generosidade com a qual ele foi tratado. Toda vez que ele ia tentar pagar alguma coisa, alguém via ele tentando pagar, passava na frente e pagava para ele. Pessoas, né, que estavam ali passando e tratando ele de uma forma muito generosa. E ele viu esse respeito nos países muçulmanos que não existe em Israel, por exemplo, porque ele estava falando de um exemplo que no Cairo, agora recentemente, precisaram construir uma ponte na cidade, né, e ia passar por cima de um antigo cemitério judaico que tem no Egito. Mesmo não tendo a comunidade judaica que você tinha hoje no Egito, sendo aquilo ali somente um local histórico, eles não destruíram o cemitério. Eles passaram a ponte ao redor e deixaram o cemitério intacto. Enquanto em Israel, você não tem o respeito nem pelo corpos dos judeus mortos, porque todas as vezes que eles querem construir uma rodovia, tem um cemitério antigo, eles passam por cima e destroem tudo. Ele falou, tem vários judeus, ele mostrou fotos aqui, que ficam montando guarda nos cemitérios para os cemitérios não serem destruídos pelo Estado de Israel, né, desse grande desrespeito. E ele falou que, assim, enquanto ele esteve lá, ele viu o parlamento iraniano, os representantes judeus do parlamento iraniano, ele viu toda uma sociedade, né, que convive com os judeus. Obviamente, a gente sabe que os judeus no Irã têm uma história de, eu acho que o quê? 2.500 anos? Acho que é mais do que isso, né? Então ele disse, essa história é contínua, os judeus são respeitados lá, e ele viu não só o passado dos judeus, mas o presente da comunidade judaica iraniana. Então ele tá falando que, assim, teve tudo isso. Obviamente, pra quem estiver assistindo aqui vai ver a legenda completa. Claro, tô fazendo somente um resumo, né? Mas é basicamente isso.
Bem, estamos chegando para o fim do nosso programa, né? Se quiser falar para ele, para não tomar mais o tempo dele, gostaríamos de fazer a última pergunta, antes do fim.
Sim.
Que como é que ele vê o rumo da causa palestina e se é possível algum dia essa convivência voltar entre os muçulmanos e os judeus e eu acho que só entre os judeus e muçulmanos dentro da Palestina. Ocupada, né, a Palestina.
Mr. Nasser is telling that this will be the last question because of lack of time that we have, but he want to know, in your opinion, what is the future of the Palestinian cause, the future of the Palestinians, as we are seeing many, horrible things happening, and if, in your opinion, this convivência, as we say in Portuguese and in Spanish also, between Jews and Muslims can go back as it was before, that we are living together for so many years.
De uma forma resumida, né?
As in a nutshell, what is your opinion about this?
Well, we hope with God's help, inshallah, God is compassionate, and we're not prophets, we don't know what it will be, but we are certainly, as I said, in the Torah it says, why are you rebelling against me? It will not be successful. It's a verse in the Torah. The state will end, and then we are certain, as history shows, the difference of religion is not an impediment to peace. On the contrary, we will always, we believe in one God. We were always living together in peace. There's no question that with God's help, we will once again, and as like it says, God says that eventually the whole world will recognize one God and serve him in harmony. So we definitely will come together. We are only yearning that this should happen soon. We're praying to God and that we should see a free Palestine. Again, we don't know how, and these details we don't know. We always, I'll try to be very concise. My rabbi, who passed on, Rabbi Beck of blessed memory, used to say always, I'm very reluctant to give solutions because if you won't agree with my solution, then you'll say, everything he said you can dismiss. But so therefore I would like to distinguish clearly between the problem and issue of a solution. A doctor diagnoses a sickness. If he doesn't diagnose the sickness and he gives cortisone for a hemorrhaging wound, he's a criminal. You have to diagnose the sickness in order to give a remedy. So first you have to know what the problem is. The world is constantly attempting to bring a solution to a conflict between Islam and Judaism, between Jews and Muslims. So we have a conflict between the two. So we need a solution. They don't know what the sickness is. That's not the sickness. It's a conflict between religions, between God and evil. That's what the conflict is. It's a selfish, flawed political movement that just started 77 years as the state, 140 years, the concept of ideology. It's a flawed concept. Remove that concept and you'll have peace. So the world does not have not diagnosed the problem. That's why they said they'll make a two-state solution. We're going to take the house that we stole and we'll divide it in two. You can have back half of it and the rest we'll take. It's all wrong. It's the wrong diagnosis. Once you know that diagnosis, then we could talk about a solution. And the solution is very simple. We spoke about apartheid. I mean, I think with God's help, it's very simple. But again, that's distinctly different than we have to know that the problem is Zionism and the state of Israel. The victims are the Palestinian people and the Jews. The villains is the Zionist state of Israel. Clearly, that is the truth, the fact. Now we'll take it from there. Have we lived together? Yes, we lived for hundreds of years. Did we have a different religion? Distinctly different religion? Yes, we had. It wasn't an impediment to coexistence? No. So, do people want to live in peace? Yes, everybody wants to eat ice cream and sit home. So, right? So everybody wants peace. So if everybody wants peace and the religion isn't the problem, will we be able to live together? Yes. What do we have to do to bring this about? You have a problem of an occupation. So the government should get up and say, you know what? They give billions of dollars to send arms to be able to constantly keep that oppression of the Palestinians solid. Just send more bombs, keep on killing, that you'll stifle it more. No, maybe step back and say like this. We'll take those billions of dollars, maybe instead of not even of billions of dollars that's required for future, but just from a few years. And let's take these people who committed atrocities, who were the prison guards, who were busy standing in Gaza and doing their demonic work. These people who feel uncomfortable, let them give them a visa, give them a green card, let them go move to the US, to UK, Canada. Just these tens of thousands of people who feel uncomfortable because of what they did evil, because of atrocities they committed. And the rest of humanity can live together. I think that it's simple, and you have to remember that we're not talking about the way the Zionists portray them, that we're dealing with some type of animal called a Palestinian. No, we're dealing with people who are intelligent university graduates. We're dealing with a community that's either under this leadership or that leadership, who all profess and talk about that they have lived in peace and want to live in peace. And the history is known to the Jews that we lived with them in peace. So their anecdotes and their facts that's on the ground is repeated by both the Jews and the Muslims. So it's only the Zionists who have twisted the narrative and said that we have an ingrained conflict. So there is a solution. And even if you wouldn't have that solution, you don't have the right to occupy another people. So God will help. Spread my word please tell the
Amen.
People in Palestine, tell the people in Gaza, we are crying with them. I always bring out that I went to Baja Barajna in Lebanon. They gave the key. We are hurting with them. People, Elbi ma Palestine. We want they should have a free Palestine. And ask also, not only that, but they should do as we say, pray to God, and the world should not be silent. And if you spread out word and take course to places, we would come educate, because people are afraid to speak up against Zionism because they're attacked as anti-Semitic. It's not anti-Semitic. Always point to the Jewish religious communities, the ones who are very religious around the world, that we pay for private education, for our kosher, that they were giving their lives for religion. And if it would be essential for Judaism to have a state, we would be the first to embrace it, because we do everything, we give our lives for the religion, and yet we're against it. Invariably, the very religious communities around the world are anti-Zionist. So if that's the case, so it must be that Judaism is not supportive of the state, and that the state is bogus. The state of Israel is bogus and unacceptable. So stand up and speak up. But be careful, don't use the word Jews or the Jewish state, because you fall into the trap. Netanyahu himself tried to say that you have to call it the Jewish state. He kept on pushing this in the world, that it should be called the Jewish state. Why? What does he need that? He doesn't go with the yarmulke. What does he care? But he needed that because he wants to be able to intimidate people, that they shouldn't be able to speak up against it. If you can say the Jewish state, the Jews, you're anti-Semitic. You're anti-Semitic. So speak up, do up, and God will help. We'll see what we're doing with his compassion, and we'll realize sooner nowadays a free Palestine.
Inshallah.
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 Here, I
Que a
could give
Palestina
you,
seja
this
livre.
is, people go to our site, to nkusa.org, and we put out a lot of information, but this is, for instance, anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism, the Zionist genocide in Gaza. You can have it, there's a lot we have in different
Eu acho
languages also.
que
And Portuguese, we were going to have.
Okay.
cada dia mais realmente está acontecendo uma grande conscientização
Sim.
para com a verdade, para
Sim.
com o certo, para com a causa palestina.
Sim.
Nunca eu vi na minha vida pessoas que não têm nenhuma ligação com os palestinos, nem ligação familiar, nem nacional, nem sanguínea,
Sim.
de apoiarem,
Sim.
de saírem pagando o preço disso, serem expulsos, né,
Isso.
das universidades.
Isso.
Sim,
Isso. O
pode falar.
Rabino trouxe esse material, né?
Sim.
Que são materiais educativos, panfletos que eles distribuem, mostrando a diferença entre o sionismo e o judaísmo. E sobre a
sim.
questão da causa palestina e a opressão que acontece. Ele disse que em breve estarão em português para fazer a distribuição no nosso idioma. Mas ele está mostrando aqui o material que eles distribuem, né, sempre que vão fazer palestras e coisas assim, apresentações. Essa que é a coisa que
Vamos
eles
divulgar
colocam.
também, inshallah. E também gostaríamos de presentear o Rabino antes do fim
He
do
said
nosso
that
programa.
before the end of our program, he want to present you and gift you
É um
some
livro
of books that
sobre
publish
as
here.
memórias do Ayatollah Khamenei.
This is a memory book from Ayatollah Khamenei, who is the
Para
current
Ayatollah
leader.
Khamenei,
Thank you
a
very
causa
much.
palestina é um dos alicerces
He's
da
saying
Revolução
that
Islâmica do Irã.
the Palestinian cause for the Ayatollah Khamenei is the one of the bases from the revolution that happened in Iran. The Palestinian cause was one of those bases.
And as I say, as a Jew, we're very thankful to the Ayatollah Khomeini for protecting the minorities, giving charities, and protecting the Jewish people, especially. That's for us a special look at him, with honor.
Sim, sim. E aqui também livro sobre a Palestina.
This is another book. It's one of the books that have been published
do
here in Brazil
nosso
about
querido
Palestine.
companheiro Said Marcos Tenório.
From the author Said Marcos Tenório, is a
É uma
Brazilian
das
author.
obras mais completas
One of the most complete,
sobre a Palestina.
books on the history of Palestine here in Brazil.
Obviamente os dois em português.
Yeah, he said obviously he's giving to you the book as in Portuguese.
Mas para mostrar que aqui também nós temos ativistas, pessoas que trabalham.
To show you that here we have also activists and people who are acting and doing this work. So
E quando nós vemos pessoas como o Rabino,
and as we see people like you, Rabbi,
a gente fica realmente mais inspirado.
We receive more inspiration this
para com essa luta, para com essa
inspiration to this cause, inspiration to this struggle that we have.
Uma última mensagem ele quer
Give
deixar
a last message to the audience here in Brazil.
para quem está assistindo.
I could just say again, don't be intimidated. Speak up. Do what you can for the people of Palestine. And I must say that I've been here in Brazil a week, and it's just you see God blessed this land. It's a beautiful land, and the people are beautiful, kind, and friendly. I have one word: obrigado.
Obrigado.
Obrigado, perfeito. Esperamos ele, inshallah, numa outra viagem.
We are waiting for you.
Foi muito curta essa viagem dele dessa
here
vez.
In Brazil. Your travel was very short, the time that we spent here, but we are waiting to do,
Inshallah, nas próximas.
Inshallah.
Muito obrigado, Rabino.
Muito
obrigado, irmão Mansur.
Agradeço.
Obrigado a todos vocês, queridos irmãos e irmãs, por acompanharem nosso programa. Até o próximo episódio do Arresala Podcast. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.